Hillbilly is a documentary examining the role our media plays in fostering negative stereotypes about rural America and Appalachia. The documentary explores the effects fracking coal mining and the 2016 presidential election have had on poor white Americans. Sally Rubin is the director of Hillbilly, which had its premiere at Doc NYC last night at the IFC Center. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, David.
Hillbilly uncovers an unexpected set of artists, poets, activists, queer musicians, all hanging out in the hills. Where exactly is Appalachia?
Appalachia spans, I think 13 states, more than 23 million people live there. It goes all the way from the tip of Maine all the way down to Mississippi. And we focus in Hillbilly mainly on the central Appalachian states, so the states that house coal and that deal with many of, the identity-related issues that are featured in the film. So we're really looking at Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee, Virginia, North Carolina, those central Appalachian states mainly.
So you live in Los Angeles, you're in New York City. When you ask people about Appalachia, they think of deliverance. We think of a backward people who are pretty easy to make fun of because they're white. You're not really offending anybody when you make fun of a hillbilly.
Right, exactly.
Is that fair to besmirch the character of hillbillies?
What we say in the film, of course, and what I believe is not only not fair, it doesn't look at the true makeup and fabric of Appalachia, which consists of so much more. Sure, there's poverty in Appalachia, there's crime, there's drugs. There's poverty, crime, and drugs all over. That's being human in 2018 in the United States. So we really look at sort of how Appalachia as a region has become a scapegoat for the problems of America. And I think, too, you raised a really interesting point here by pointing out that it's okay in some circles or deemed to be okay to make fun of these people because they may be poor, but they're white. For me, growing up in Boston, that was part of the impetus to make the film, was really feeling the hypocrisy there. Why is it okay to make fun of poor white people? What's the phenomenon that goes on there? So Hillbilly really tries to explore that and uncover that.
Do you remember Senator Zell Miller? Is he mentioned in the film?
No, not at all.
Senator Zell Miller, he died this year. He was a Georgia Democrat, switched parties in 2004 to endorse George W. Bush. He was a bit unhinged. He delivered a fiery endorsement of Bush in 2004. He supported the war. But he ended up on my radar in 2003 after CBS announced plans to produce a reality series based on the Beverly Hillbillies. Zell Miller was from Georgia, and he took to the Senate floor and demanded that CBS cancel the program. And this is what he said in the well of the Senate. He said, what CBS and CEO Les Moonves proposed to do with this cracker comedy is bigotry, pure and simple. Bigotry for big bucks. They know that the only minority left in this country that you can make fun of and demean and humiliate are hillbillies in particular and rural people in general. And I remember thinking that was funny and true and okay. Are people from Appalachia stigmatized by Deliverance and the Beverly Hillbillies the same way Hispanics are stigmatized and African Americans and the LGBTQ community are stigmatized?
I think every group has its type of stigma and its type of kind of two-dimensional depictions that dumb many of the images down to something that's really basic and that doesn't represent the reality of the population. I do think that in some ways, some of the stigmatism of Appalachian people and some of the media portraits out there, they're very harmful. And I wouldn't say they're more harmful than depictions or stereotypical depictions of other groups. I don't think it's fair to argue that. But I do think that in some circles in urban America in particular, it's seen as almost cool, or it makes you somehow more liberal if you're making fun of poor whites.
Are we finding that people won't hire somebody because they're a hillbilly?
People from the region have talked about that type of phenomenon. Where it comes up and where we deal with this in the film is really around accent and dialect. And people, Ashley York, who's the co-director of the film with myself, talks in the film. She's actually in the film, and she talks about how when she went to journalism school, her professors told her that if she wanted to make it anywhere, she had to give up that accent and sort of whitewash any culture that she was bringing to that career. So I think that there's a certain erasure of one's mountain identity that some people from the region talk about experiencing when they go into a profession.
Right, but I'm going to push back a little. Nobody's going into Appalachia and hanging these people or going to a hillbilly bar and shooting it up, right? I mean, they're not being dragged 3 miles the way Byrd was or crucified on a white picket fence like Shepard, right? Their plight is not equal to that of African Americans in the LGBTQ community.
I certainly don't want to be in a position of arguing anybody's plight in comparison to anyone else. People know what their own experience is. I can say that some of the really brilliant, talented scholars who we've worked with in the region, people who are Appalachian, who've grown up there, feel a really nasty and insipid bigotry towards them for who they are, for where they're from, and for how they talk. And it's hurtful and painful for these people.
So they're being held back. Why? They're not growing economically because of the quality of their education and maybe voting against their self-interests.
Those are exactly the kind of ideas that we disabused in the movie.
Good.
And especially in a place, in a region that's 23 million people. There's so much generalization about the region that is so just inaccurate when you actually look at who's there and you actually dig into some of these alternate, lesser-known Appalachian identities, these self-ascribed Fabulachans and the Afro-Latin poets and Appalachicanos and Afro-Lasians and all kinds of people from the region who have so much rich culture, who are anything but the sort of poor white victim that people love to blame. And we really look at the politics of the people in the region, and some of them love Trump, some of them love Clinton. Ashley York is in the film talking to the few members of her family who actually are Trump supporters. She's a Clinton supporter, and she really offers a model of sort of how to listen across the political and cultural divide.
White people are not doing well in America, and they feel threatened by others, and they're being left behind economically and turning to populist fascists and opioids. Is that the plight of especially white men in this country? Suicide rates among white men are some of the highest we've ever seen. Their life expectancy is not good. White men in particular, especially in the states that support Trump, white men are not doing well, are they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, I couldn't possibly try to generalize about a whole population, but I can say that the people featured in the film, the few members of Ashley's family there that we film with who do support Trump, really talk about just feeling listened to and heard by someone for the first time when they have felt ignored by politicians and kind of left behind for many, many decades and generations. And I'm not saying that President Trump actually is listening to people there or not, but at least when he was campaigning, he said things that had people there feel that he was interested in helping them and in helping them try to keep their jobs. And yeah, I think that a lot of people who support Trump do feel, that they've just been ignored at best and really put down at worst.
And there are people who call themselves hillbillies, proudly.
Absolutely.
What is the origin of the word hillbilly?
The word goes way back to, I believe, the 1890s. It was first used to describe, I'll never get the definition exactly right off the top of my head, but it was something like an untrammeled citizen who is lazy, does what he wants, carries a gun. It was kind of a very benign example of this stereotype, but it did embody some of those qualities that you would think of now. In the movie, some of our subjects do very proudly identify as hillbillies, have really reclaimed that term and really taken it on and own it. And then other folks from Appalachia really don't. It's like any other label. Some people use it and reclaim it, and some don't, and that's part of what makes it interesting.
I would think being a hillbilly, you would be proud of your self-sufficiency, being able to live up in the woods, hunt your own food, cook for yourself, not rely on others. Is that what you're finding? Or are they blending more into the culture and needing to be on the grid more?
Really depends on the person, but the folks that we film with in the film, some of them do talk about a sense of self-reliance and competency that some people from the mountains have. I mean, there has been kind of the stereotype of the Daniel Boone type archetype, the romanticized mountaineer, and we point out in the film how dangerous that is, to really simplify someone down and romanticize them. That doesn't do anybody a service either. We really try to portray people from the region as being complex and multidimensional and not fitting into one neat little box.
Right. And you say they're queer hillbilly communities?
Sure, there's queer people all over, and we film with some of the really great folks there. Silas House, who's a brilliant poet and author and artist, he's also one of our executive producers. He's a very outspoken gay man. He's featured in the film.
And where's he located?
He's in Berea, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And then a really wonderful young man named Sam Gleaves, who plays banjo and really talented and calls himself and his friends, they call themselves Fabulachans, and they're really inspiring.
And they're African-American hillbillies.
Sure, yeah. There's all kinds of intersectionalities of identity there. And in the film, we feature the Afro-Latin Poets, which is a group of African-American folks from the South who call themselves the Afro-Latins. And they do this really great work about intersectionality and being Black and from the mountains.
And most of their jobs are not in coal mining. What are most of their jobs?
Yeah, of the people that I've just talked about, these tend to be scholars, academics, writers, teachers. Certainly there are folks from the region, still plenty of them, who are in coal mining. Some of them are featured in the film. But yeah, and there are Black coal miners, and we deal with that also a little bit in the movie. But yeah, it's a different sect in some ways of society there.
You sound very protective of these people. Why?
My mom's from the mountains of East Tennessee. I'm protective of her, and I don't like to generalize. Part of what I try to do as a person, and part of what we so try to do in the movie is to undo all the generalizations. And I feel competent as a filmmaker, but I never want to speak on the behalf of so many other people who have so many different stories.
Is there a trait that you noticed among all the Appalachians that they all shared?
I don't think you can give a common trait about 23 million people. But with that said, if I had to talk about what are some of the key Appalachian values in general, emphasis on storytelling, emphasis on food, culture, and family, the importance of family and ancestral identity and our roots and music, all of these values are very central to the Appalachian identity.
Your film has gotten rave reviews. It won the jury prize for Best Documentary at the Los Angeles Film Festival, and Michael Moore and Dolly Parton both love it. So congratulations. Where can we see it if we're not in New York?
You can go to our website, which is hillbillymovie.com, and we're actually having a theatrical release in New York beginning November 23rd. So the night after Thanksgiving for a week, we'll be at the Cinema Village Theater. And Ashley and I will be there for a couple of those screenings.
Congratulations. You teach at Chapman College. What do you teach? I would assume filmmaking,
right? Documentary film at Chapman University.
Sally Rubin is a documentary filmmaker, and her new movie is Hillbilly. Go to sallyrubinfilms.com for more information. Thank you for joining us. Can you stay on the line, please?
Sure.
Thank you.